podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network, kingofpodcasts.com.
Spotify is soaring, and NPR is neutralized.
The King of Podcasts radio network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
And welcome to, what is this now? The 8th anniversary of the Broadcasters Podcast and episode 420. Thank you for listening into the program. King of Podcasts here with you. The website is kingofpodcasts.com. And quite a way to start the year. We're going to go into audio this time around, podcasting and traditional radio and where things are right now, because we can see the real, what I call the podcast pendulum really swinging across because of the changes being made. So Spotify and NPR making a lot of headlines. We're going to go into those real quickly. And when I look at what Spotify is doing and the changes being made, you know, one thing is with podcasting, you know, Spotify has really caught up on so much ground and has become so important to podcasting in general. And one of the things for me is that in my own content, that Spotify has been very important for the stats that I get from it. It's only recently that the API for Spotify is really starting to affect the download numbers from my programming more than ever. Like I was able to go and see what my downloads were on Spotify. And yes, this program doesn't necessarily get a major boost from Spotify. It's not really where my audience comes from. They're finding the show in different areas. And also it's an overall audience that's completely different. Meanwhile, some of my other programming is much different story because of the level of followers I get and the kind of plays that I get off of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get some traction from the program, but, you know, not from this end anyway. And it's like, okay, if I put it on YouTube, it's a bit of hit or miss, depending on the subject. If I put something out there that's very mainstream and will catch a lot of attention, something about K-pop, something about music, something about movies, yeah, of course that gets more attention. My episode last week, of which I put out an episode where I was on with Lou Pate on WPHT in Philadelphia, and we talked about movies and the sunset of MTV, that gets traction. Things like that. But for Spotify, it's obviously, if you try to put out content, it's more of the more mainstream fare. I don't know necessarily if industry stuff really plays well. But of course, in my programming, I'm looking at, okay, my wrestling program does pretty well on there, but the Praise and the Debaucherous by Society, Dating Culture, Out of Bounds podcast does gangbusters over there. I just don't, it's amazing what it does. But I don't mind it too much. That's okay. But it is very important for me to go and look at what my numbers look like altogether from the program when I put it out here and see what I get from it. So I pay attention to it. And if you want to talk about trying to get yourself on board with a podcast and get it someplace where you can start it right off and right away, then absolutely go ahead and do it on Spotify, because it's an easy entrance to get in there, among others. And why not? Like, see what you can get from it. So I appreciate it. And, you know, with some shows that I did with the others, I noticed that my content, there's certain things that I talk about that will catch attention. But tonight is industry. We're going to stick to that because there's a lot to go and bring up. Starting off with Spotify going out on all video podcasting. So they've been making a lot of news this week. They opened up a new Hollywood studio and announced that they have contributed more than $10 billion to the podcasting industry. I haven't gotten a dime of that money. So just to make sure that I don't do this where I'm necessarily getting paid for it. I might get a little something off of advertising, but really this is my own thing. So just to make that point here. So video podcasting is much more important. Obviously with YouTube, they've been made the point about what video podcasting is all about. But for Spotify itself, they obviously are getting more into the video field. One of the things before they went into this part was they had their music videos. The fact that you can have music videos now on the Spotify platform to watch. Or Spotify's been working their way from just being an audio-only platform to becoming an audiobook platform. So not only are you going to listen, they also want you to read, and now they want you to watch. So they're working their way up. So they're diversifying a lot. So now they have their video podcast expansions and building out video content, including podcasts, so they can open up more revenue streams for creators. So YouTube has so far been the unexpected winner in the video podcast arena, and Spotify's advertising revenue has not been as high as once. But YouTube has been able to get creators over there to the platform for lucrative non-exclusive deals, bringing shows and videos to the platform. And we also know that YouTube is also working on nighttime programming. They're doing a lot of feature programming to basically take the place of what you would watch in terms of content on your traditional channels. They want to produce late night programming. They want to produce other programming out there and get the attention. Then they also have the tie in with Netflix, where Netflix is also now taking in iHeartMedia podcasts, among other things. You know, the podcasting is now being brought in to become the replacement. But the fact is that where are you going to consume it? And Spotify wants to be in that game. So initially last year, they started video uploads, prioritizing those with the rollout of their podcast partner program. 65% of eligible networks and shows have enrolled. And there are requirements to get on there, and that's the part that was going to be tough for me. You know, shows hitting 1,000 engaged audience members on Spotify based on plays over the last 30 days to monetize. And that's actually been a decrease from 2,000 listeners. But also, consumption has to be a cumulative of 10,000 hours to 2,000 hours across the same 30-day window, or 1,000 to 2,000. A cumulative total of 10,000 hours or 2,000 hours. That still confuses me. And creators have to put out 3 published episodes all time, not during a 30-day period, to monetize. Like right now, YouTube confuses me and befuddles me because I am increasing my subscriber count. I got 652 subscribers now. I reached the 500 subscriber mark somewhere in the middle of last year. I want to say April or May. But they asked for the watch time to reach 2,500 watch hours, or 3,000 watch hours, excuse me. And I've been hovering between 2,300 and 2,500 watch hours on any given time right now at all. I can't get people, I can get more people to subscribe, but people are not retaining my programming for as long as they want. So I'm stuck here trying to get more subscribers, which I've been doing, but trying to get them to consistently go and tune into a program for hours on end is very difficult. And I mean, I do that with some of our programming. I can see that I've gotten the watch times up, but it's a very hard struggle. So for as a creator, yeah, we love all these new places to go ahead and monetize, but the parameters for creators like me that are not necessarily out there putting out a whole lot of money and investment to do this, this is still a hobby at the end of the day. I would love for this to be something full-time. I mean, podcasting I do full-time and production ends, but to do this where I'm hosting programming and making real money off of it, I've been trying, but I've only been able to do that with help, with other resources that I have. But on my own, very difficult. Very, very difficult. As of April, the Spotify Partner Program enrolled individuals are expected to have more control over their advertising. So creators will be able to replace, remove, and add spots in video programs for more timely messages. To filter out what you don't want on the particular ads, that's pretty cool. And on top of the new delivery metrics, they're auto-swapping sponsored messages and viewer sponsorship performance particulars via new delivery metrics. And in terms of the monetization recalibration, they're also putting together a Spotify distribution API enabling podcasters to publish and monetize videos on Spotify directly from participating hosting platforms without needing to change how they work or re-upload content. So platforms like Acast, Audio Boom, Libsyn, Omni, and Podigy are signing on soon. Spreaker, please, let's go. Let's jump on here. I don't know if you're going to do it because you're associated with iHeart, but let's go, man. I want that to happen, seriously. And also, The Golden Globes are coming up this coming up weekend, and they're going to be presenting the first ever Best Podcast Award. Who knows what all that'll be? It will not be me, so it's not going to matter. So Spotify's done that to try to create more for the creators, more incentives, more monetization, more control over their content, aside from their content, so they can get the ads they want placed out there and be monetized, in a much more way that they have more control over it. And Spotify is also closing and has closed a number of large podcast deals, but it's unclear whether the total accounts for each of the involved expenditures. Now, we also know that there's a new Hollywood studio for Spotify called Sycamore. They're boasting flexible recording rooms, multi-camera video setups, and on-site production support. So popular podcasters can waltz in, make the studio their own. At the outset, Sycamore will serve as home to Ringer shows like The Rewatchables, The Ringerverse, and The Hottest Take. Beyond these podcasts, access will be available by invitation only to video creators in the Spotify Partner Program based on availability and production needs. So if you want to be in LA and do a little run over there, you can actually do that. Interesting. And at the same time, more money is trying to be picked up for Spotify in terms of another price increase coming up for Spotify going here. But we haven't been hearing about the super premium platform that they're going to have, and I think it's going to be $26 a month from what I've last read about it. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not, but it's one of those things that has been talked about before, and there's consistently things that are going on. I believe there's another thing they already did that where Spotify, you could actually now, like you could do, like you used to on your desktop, you can actually have other followers see what you're listening to at that moment, which is always a cool little feature, but they had it on desktop. I don't see where they lost it on desktop, but that's what happened. And that's another thing that's also been very fascinating is the fact that when I hear people talk about music and where certain songs, how important it is for people to go ahead and have a song become popular as long as it is being playlisted, which was a phrase I never heard before. But yeah, think about the fact that there are people that if you are creating music and you might not be looking necessarily, if you want to get your music to go ahead and stream well, hit the charts, something like that, maybe eventually get the radio in the secondary market. Well, you want to be able to have your song being put in playlists. And there was a big deal about SZA and Doechii having a new song out, and I forget what the name of the song is, but I wasn't necessarily interested in it. But people were complaining about the fact that the song did not chart in the Spotify top 50 of the US or the top 100, I forget what it was. And so people were complaining about the fact that it was not getting playlisted. I was like, all right, I didn't know that was such a big deal. Like, I don't necessarily listen to the playlists that Spotify curates. I didn't know that was such a big deal. But the curation they do for me, of which I will take the music that comes in and I'll put it onto my playlist, that's a different story. Because I still keep my own playlists. They're all on my website, by the way, kingofpodcasts.com. I'm a big Spotify person since, as far as I can think of, I want to say I've had Spotify Premium since, 2017 now, 2018? And never go back. I mean, even if it goes to $26, probably $24, because I'm not buying the package that will have the additional audiobook package. I'm fine with, 15 hours of audiobook time a month, because I don't get into that much of audiobooks. I mean, I used to have an Audible subscription, but after a while, I really went through all the books I wanted to go ahead and read. And so have a random book to go ahead and read once in a while, if I'm interested in it, if I'm kind of fatigued from my music, that's not a bad idea. But there's so much I got to go and watch that or listen to that I don't have time for books right now. So another story came out, an op-ed about Spotify. If they are creating more room for creativity, for monetization for podcasters, should they do something for the music artists and increasing the payout barrier? Is Spotify spreading its royalty pool across too many artists? Because they're trying to say, well, podcasters are going to take some of the pot of what the music artists are making. So one music industry strategist, according to Music Business Worldwide, thinks that the streaming giant should implement a 250,000 monthly listener threshold concentrating payments among professional musicians who can earn a sustainable living. And that comes in the positive direction for podcasters because the eligibility requirements have been changed. For artists, for music artists, musicians, Spotify maintains a different standard. Tracks must reach at least 1,000 streams in the past 12 months to generate royalties on the platform. And that was introduced in April 2024, including an undisclosed minimum number of unique listeners to prevent gaming the system. So Substack writer, he's a music industry strategist, Joe Gavea, says artists below the 250,000 monthly listener threshold are already receiving payouts, so small they change nothing. So he talks that there should be a redistribution of Spotify's $10 billion annual royalty pool among far fewer qualifying artists, and they should change the per stream rates to increase. When everyone gets paid, no one gets paid enough. And the current system is quote-unquote quietly killing the middle class of music through extreme dilution. He says an artist generating 1 million monthly streams could see their monthly income jump from $4,000 to $6,500 and $8,000, transforming streaming from supplemental income into a sustainable livelihood. $8,000? Nah, that's not that much. The royalties are not that much for it. Any artist with under 250,000 monthly listeners is getting $20 here, $50 there, $100 if they get lucky. And the micropayments do not fund growth, change strategy, or enable sustainability. Okay, but why are you expecting Spotify to go ahead and, do anything about that? You can't completely rely on Spotify for the attention, the exposure. That's where the artist has to go and do what they can with TikTok, with Instagram, with social media, with YouTube, and find a way to get themselves heard in other places. Also, the same thing going with, the live shows they can do, the live performances they can do. For people getting viral on social media or somewhere else, that's what they have to do to get themselves up to a higher level. There's a larger argument to this that I could go into, but, I understand where they're coming from. Like, that everybody should get a little piece of the pie. Out of $10 billion, they would think there is. And so he also cites Deezer and Universal Music Group with their artist-centric royalty model. Believe, the parent company of TuneCore, where even that system was unfair, centered around taking compensation for rising artists and to allocate it to top and established artists. And also making the fact that with YouTube, you require 1,000 subscribers plus significant watch time before monetization. And TikTok demands 10,000 followers and 100,000 views in 30 days. Listen, Gavea is actually making the argument for someone like me to get paid. And I appreciate that. But at the end of the day, I understand that, if you're willing to go and hit that certain threshold, it's a matter of effort. And it's a matter of, who can be able to go and reach that mark. Not everybody's supposed to go and be an entertainer. Not everyone's supposed to be famous. And not everyone is going to be able to go ahead and make a living off of this. I understand that part. Like, it's been nice to get a couple $100 in advertising revenue every year. That's been cool. And I've only really used that money just to go ahead and reinvest into the platform. It's everything I do in podcasting. There was a couple of years ago when I made $250 in advertising revenue from dynamic ad insertion in a year. And the microphone I use right now, this Shure SM7 USB, I bought because of the money I made in 1 year off of advertising, and I put it in. And when it comes to other platforms, for storage, for graphics, for audio enhancement, for everything else, like there's so much more for AI, the money I've been able to go and make from the ad revenue has gone to this. So I just reinvest back in. And eventually I think something will happen with all this, but it's okay. There's a thing to be said about creators that absolutely want to make sure they can make money because they feel like this is the creator society. A lot of people will come in thinking they need to go in. They want to be able to do this to make money and not have to do anything else. And trust me, it's not been easy to go and do that. Like I've always, for the longest time, to be in media in general, I've always had to have a side gig. I've always had to be doing something else. Okay. Going back to college. Okay. I was writing stories and reporting for the Palm Beach Post for sports. That was what? Every week I'd have a game to go and cover this and that for most of the year. And so maybe about 36, 40 weeks a year, I'd have that. And this is what, 1990, what, 97, 98? And, you know, maybe a few hundred, I would maybe like maybe $500-$600 off of that. The state of Florida would pay me $40 a month off a stipend that I have from the student government of Florida Atlantic University, where I was going to school at. Working on the radio station, I actually got a salary of $40 a month, I believe it was, to be on the radio station as I put it. I put myself down as music director, urban music. So of course I wasn't making anything off of that. So I had to work somewhere else, whether it was a Peaches record store or it was Eckerd or Publix, and like I had to work other jobs just so I could have a couple $100 a month in my pocket to work off of. I mean, that's not even that much to go and pay for gas, but I did do that. And then moving forward, you know, I was working in radio, but my thing was I still had to do other work. Like at one point I was doing telemarketing and then I got back in, and it's like telemarketing I was doing for 4 or 5 years to supplement income. And then when Uber and Lyft came around, you know, I started doing that, 2016, 2017. And ever since then, I mean, I had that to work off of. And it was nice to go and have that option to work off of. But I had to go and do something else just to stay in media. Because radio and podcasting, I would say, is a cruel mistress. And being a creator can be cruel, right? You're not always expected to go ahead and make a whole lot of bank off of this. Like, not everybody gets to do that. But the push and the drive to be able to go and do it in the first place, yeah, it's fun. I can't deny that. So we all keep pushing and trotting and pushing along and see what happens. But for me, you know, I'm doing this on my own. I produce, I edit, I host. And for podcasting, you know, how many resources do you want to have? For those that want to go and put video together, I'm still kind of on the fence with it. Like for me, it's still very difficult for me to go ahead and put together video content on a regular basis. It's not easy because it costs money to get the video editing software, to have a particular software that will render pretty quickly, plus have the machinery, the computer to go and have the right amount of RAM and memory to be able to handle all this stuff. And it's not been easy. Like, I mean, I'll admit there's been points where Adobe Express has really worked out for me, where I don't necessarily have to go and use video software to go and do certain things that I want to do. Like, it's nice just to create a nice little backdrop with captions and just put it together. But even that's not perfect because some of that synchronicity doesn't work perfectly either. Like there's more money that has to be spent investment into it. But that's what I'm going to take the money and do for it. I'm not trying to go ahead and think that I'm going to be delusional here and think I'm going to make a complete living just doing this right now here in my studio and keep going. Like, I have to keep myself lean and mean. I have to keep the investment at a certain level. So there's a budget behind this. But what I'm giving a lot of is time. But I've also taken the right resources to create the right amount of time so I can manage it and do this right. And I really love the fact that I'm able to go and do it this way. And for what Spotify does, I can appreciate what they're doing. But I'm not ready to go ahead and move my content over. Like, I did have Spotify at one point when it was the other platform it was called. I forgot what it was called. But I was there. And there was that initial early onset where you could put a show up there for free. It's one of the first places I knew of that you could go ahead and get your own RSS feed for free and publish all you wanted up there. And it was great. But, you know, it was that initial like pilot program, and you could only make up to a maximum of $50 in advertising revenue. And then you couldn't make any more unless you hit certain parameters. So I hit my $50, I cashed it out, and I was done with it. And I was like, well, can't do much more with it. And then I transferred that podcast, which was When I'm Not Podcasting, and I moved it over. And I renamed it the Praise and Debaucherous. And I just went along with it and kept going. Already had an audience there. Because that show, I did something with the content. I realized I needed to narrowcast it. The stats I kept reading, because of the platform I was on, the stats I was provided helps a lot. It's great that Spotify gives you the stats that they do. Same thing with Apple Podcasts. I can appreciate all that. So following the stats not helping much either when I have to go and try to create the kind of content that will be enough to monetize. And then the other part I have to deal with, which is a constant grind, is the creators that have to continue to create content and serve the algorithm of whatever platform you're on. Because part of it is, if you're on YouTube, there's a certain algorithm you have to follow. They want you to be a one-trick pony and keep doing it. And if you're a podcaster, they expect you to go ahead and stick to a certain subject and stay with it every time. Like, honestly, I know that's the secret for like this program. If I wanted to go ahead and monetize it more, that I should be doing more of the mainstream content. Like, I already know the secret that a few years back, if I talk about the everyday pop culture stuff, music, movies, TV, and radio, but I don't talk about the industry side, that I'm talking more about the gossip or the commentary or the criticism and all this and that, of course, that always does better. I know that. And I know that for a long time. And so I put it in there, but I don't make it a point to be just talking about the same thing over and over. It's like alpha male dating shows. They talk about the same stuff with the same people. It's just a regurgitation. And yeah, that might work for a while. You might do really well with it. But then some people, when they're doing a certain program, then they're pigeonholed to do the same thing. And if they want to do something else, they have to start a new platform just to continue to do something else. It's like you're not allowed to go ahead and diversify your content. You have to stick to the algorithm that gets you somewhere, and then you can move along. But I can't do that. I mean, even with this program here, I want to go and do the show that I want to do. There's content I want to talk about. And so for me to talk about what NPR is doing, what Spotify is doing, what radio is doing, yeah, who's all listening to radio now? I care. And this is stuff that started with me from the onset of this program in 2017 when I started it. Radio is one of the first things I wanted to talk about. But I also have my own affinity for everything else in media. And I want to be able to talk about it. And you know what? Who else do I have to talk about it? So I find some people on here that catch this podcast every week, and I get to enjoy letting somebody hear it. At least I know some people are out there listening to it. It's not the bigger audience I could get for Depraved and Debaucherous. That's okay. But I get an audience. And I'm grateful for the audience that I get. And my wrestling audience is very niche driven, but they also listen in. And some actually do a little crossover and listen to this program and my other programs. And I am grateful that they all listen to me on these platforms and all these different subjects. Because like at the end of the day, it's me they get to know, King of Podcasts. And, I have a lot of different things to talk about. And I think I'm pretty knowledgeable and adept and well-read, experienced, and have some expertise in all these different subjects. I always inject myself a little bit into this here. So at least I think there's some of that comes into play. It's like to create content today, if you want to monetize it, yes, you're going to have to sell out. You're going to have to go ahead and put yourself into doing content that's going to serve and satisfy the beast that is the monetization, the ad revenue that you want to get for yourself that will be shared to you if you play ball. If you go along with what the social media algorithms or what the content folks that are listening to podcasts, the podcasts, some of them should be niche driven. So you want to have it a certain way. Yeah, I have a niche here talking about the media, but it's not necessarily the same kind of show every week for everybody to listen to. And that's okay too. I mean, I think if you listen to this program every week, you're going to find something you're going to enjoy. But for some people, they will find a certain show, a certain episode, catch it. It's just like people that want to listen to interviews. If you are not doing something to go ahead and make something consistent that people will listen to the podcast for, which if you want to make something consistent that people will go ahead and come back to listen to, it's got to be you as the host. It can't just be the interviews you bring on. Like right now, I'm trying to go ahead and put another show back up in the cannabis space. And for me, part of the thing is sure, we get interviews on there, but they also know it's me, even though I'm not branding myself on there. But I am making sure that people will hear my points, what I'm saying, and make a good point out of it. It's like I'm trying really hard to do something really big. I'm trying to do something very important because I'm talking about certain subjects and certain content that I wish there was a podcast out there that would do this for me. But I did it because I was trying to fill a void. I will say this again. If you could do a podcast that doesn't need to go and fill the same void that's out there, because there are a lot of shows, by the way, if there's content that's trying to serve a certain algorithm, there are a lot of people doing it. Okay? Sure. One of my programs could be on dating and relationships, but I don't just talk about that. There's a lot more to talk about within that subject, a lot in that circle. So I branch it out, and I have found a good rotation in that, and that's great. And I'm getting some awards and adulations for it. Awesome. For wrestling, it's pretty simple. I mean, I have my commentary there, and who I know is going to listen to it will listen to it, and that's great. And when people are outraged, they'll find my program even more because it's the commentary and criticism that works. And as for this program, well, I always know that I can do my run-of-the-mill program here. There will be listeners to it, and I'm grateful for them. But at the end of the day, I'm also going to do it where I'm doing the content because I want to do it, because I'm interested in it, because I have something to say about it. And who else do you have to talk about with this anyway? And I think more of this is that if you're trying to chase the dollar doing this, it doesn't become as fun. With radio, we've always learned, and this is one thing I always tell with clients, when you're doing radio, when you're doing podcasting, it's still like doing radio. You're still talking to one other person that's listening to you from the microphone that you're on, listening to you. You want to be able to go and talk to that one person. There might be millions out there. You never know. But there should at least be one person that you're talking to intimately, and you're talking to them. And you're talking about what they want to hear from you. Let's move on to NPR. Now, CEO Catherine Marr, she is dealing with a lot right now. One of the stories that came out is the fact that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is planning to close. Let's go into that first. National Public Radio issued a statement that the fact is that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is going to vote itself out of existence. And while the end of that organization marks the close of a defining chapter in American public media, it will not mark the conclusion of the mission of NPR. They say here in their statement, while the structures that surround us may change, the need for public media has never gone greater, and our commitment to serving the public with free, reliable, and independent journalism is unwavering. NPR, local stations, local national organizations who believe in a free and independent press, supported by audiences in every corner of the nation, will continue to provide rigorous, trustworthy reporting. We will continue this work and with resolve and creativity powered by the public trust that has sustained us this far. See, but they don't necessarily have to have the radio component. I've said this many times. If they were just a podcast network, they would do great. And, dare I say, do they need to be on all the FM stations all across the country? I would love to go and see if Sirius XM would do a deal with National Public Radio, give them room to operate not all these different stations that have to be out there. If you want to create some separate channels out there, I guess you could. But imagine if NPR could just be run standalone as a national platform and make it easier for that. Because the thing is, I think that's the other thing I also look at too. With National Public Radio, does it really do that much from a local sense? Not really. I can't tell you how many NPR stations that I know that are running classic music or running music in general. And they don't really have the staffing or the resources or any local programming to sustain why a station should be on a local frequency. I don't understand that. So why not give them just a national spot where they can be heard? Let them make it available. Okay, they can find it on streaming platforms. They can find it on Sirius XM. They can find it somewhere else. iHeartRadio and all these different places. Just make it where it's available and let people stream it. And then the radio dials don't necessarily have to have the station syndicated, because for the most part, stations that are funded by NPR, they're either going to run music or they're going to run the same programming across the board with very little local programming, if any. Meanwhile, we know that there are certain member stations of the bigger markets that are producing content, sure. And as far as I know, do any of those NPR shows have any video content? I don't think any of them do. If they do, I really pay attention to it. But I think it's kind of interesting about that. And then Catherine Marr, as I said, the fact that there's a loss of $500 million in federal funding, reshaping the system that supports public radio and television. She spoke to the New York Times and asked if she was considering to step aside. She says, quote, "I really don't like bullies." And she believed the broader mission of NPR outweighed the pressures she faced earlier in her tenure. And political pressure soon gave way to a more existential threat. So NPR and PBS could survive without federal support, relying primarily on underwriting, member dues, and donations. The impact on local stations are far more severe, many stations relying on CPB funding for a majority of their operating budgets. Now, there are questions that are being asked about when it came to National Public Radio and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the leadership. There was a call this past spring where the president and CEO, Patricia Harrison of the CPB, asked Marr whether she would publicly acknowledge concerns from critics who viewed NPR's reporting as biased. According to people familiar with the exchange, Catherine Marr refused, saying that the journalism for NPR did not warrant such a concession and that it would ultimately undermine the organization without satisfying critics. And this disagreement escalated, and Harrison ultimately told Marr she should resign for the good of public media, according to multiple sources, excuse me. So since the CPB lost the funding altogether, and in July, public media was thus defunded, local stations have announced layoffs and budget reductions. NPR reporting increased broadcast listening up 8%, according to Radio Research Consortium data, and growing digital reach driven in part by the Tiny Desk concerts on YouTube. So tensions with the corporation happened in September when the corporation was awarded a major radio distribution grant to public media infrastructure, a new coalition by WNYC, PRX, and others. NPR reviewed the move as politically motivated and sought a restraining order to block the funding shift. One media executive for public media says mom and dad are fighting. And then there was also a back and forth with the corporation about a settlement restoring partial funding for NPR satellite distribution system and declaring the executive order unconstitutional. And NPR also announced temporary fee relief for member stations. So the corporation will wind down this month, and some stations have opted to disaffiliate from NPR and PBS entirely. But NPR instead saw record donations in 2025 and will provide $22 million in direct financial support to member stations. And Marr says the system is weaker overall, but NPR remains on firm footing. An interesting story from Sean Ross, who put out commentary to Inside Radio when they were asking about who had the hits in 2025 on radio. What were radio stations really listening to the most? What was the music that was drawing the most attention among music formats? And one particular format was adult album alternative, or AAA. And that the format led all others in top 20 hits, signaling programmer confidence, healthier label relationships, and a deeper flow of viable new product. And new music for other formats felt like a trickle in 2025. So other formats that performed really well with a lot of new music and really good audiences was Regional Mexican, Rhythmic Top 40. Each had 105 new hits on their formats. Urban with 102 songs. Active Rock continues to rebound in the last couple of years. But most major new music formats were relatively static in 2025, with a few titles from the previous year. The quantity of new music doesn't always correlate to format success, but it did happen that there were a few success stories from the AAA world, notably a nonprofit, WXPN, in Philadelphia. But format booms do not happen without programmer optimism about the current state of product. A healthy product flow also indicates a strong relationship between broadcasters and record labels. And mainstream adult contemporary radio, the Soccer Mom radio, actually passed the aggressive hot AC format in terms of top 20 hits last year. So it's important to say that the formats where you hear more new music that are getting more younger listeners or more new listeners that are wanting to listen to new music. The new music is coming from, again, adult album alternative, regional Mexican, rhythmic top 40, urban, and active rock. Pop music, nowhere to be found on this list. Nowhere. Well, top 40 is down there. It's just, it's number 11. There we go. According to they say here, in 52 weeks, 90 songs were new found that were being discovered from radio. There's thousands upon thousands of songs in the pop area, and radio doesn't do enough anything in that pop format. They're not even trying, which is quite weird. So, last thing I want to bring up here to wrap things up was a story that came out from Hollywood Reporter. The Wrap. Their predictions this year for creator platform diversification, bigger deals in Hollywood. Creator predictions. Kelly Cobb wrote the story, so I'm going to just take the quick top 8 here. One is Hollywood will continue to collaborate with creators on their terms. The AI era will make authenticity more valuable. AI will be the creator's biggest threat and their biggest tool. Podcasts will become a commonplace audience growth tool. Yeah, it's the new talk show. We're seeing it more and more all together. And some of the shows out there, yeah, they're crazy, they're wild, and they got their own kind of formats to it, but it's okay. Because there's more video podcasts forever. On Spotify, 80% of the top podcasts in the U.S. during last year had video. And YouTube viewers watched over 700 million hours of podcasts from their living rooms. And maybe a few of them listened to this show and watched on there. So, More crossover between long form and short form content. They also say that scripted content will really take off. So we're going to keep an eye on all this. There's a lot to go and get into this year. Let's see how it all turns out. We're looking forward to it. And one other story for the media front is that newsrooms are pushing deeper into AI. Editorial missteps, staff resistance, and public skepticism haven't slowed experimentation. News outlets are wrestling with how to embrace AI without eroding trust. This is Insider, Washington Post, the LA Times. They're grappling with how to deploy generative AI in ways that increase speed and scale without undermining trust or the role of journalists. Neiman Lab has made a prediction for 2026 that AI will rewrite the architecture of the newsroom. Quote, AI breaks the hamster wheel of journalism, and AI will force us, to be more ambitious, more human storytellers, to cite just a few. All right, so we're going to keep an eye on things here from the media standpoint. Not much to go and talk about when it comes to movies right now, because there's not a lot of good movies coming out yet. Some things to watch, but it's all popcorn movies. You know how it is. Gerard Butler, Jason Statham, those type of folks, they're the ones that put out movies this time of year, and that's what people will watch. Then with music, it's still a very slow ramp up, but we'll see what the streaming story right now on the Billboard charts and their change of algorithm does. We'll find all that out. And more on the next Broadcasters podcast. Remember, the content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.